The morning light cut through the bedroom curtains like an accusation. Sarah lay perfectly still, her head pounding with each heartbeat, trying to piece together the fragments of last night's office holiday party. Beside her, David was already awake, scrolling through his phone with unusual intensity. "How are you feeling?" he asked without looking up, his voice flat. "Like I got hit by a truck," she admitted, pressing her palms against her temples. "I shouldn't have had that last glass of wine. Or maybe the one before that." David finally turned toward her, and something in his expression made her stomach clench. It wasn't concern, it was something harder, something that looked like barely contained anger. "Do you remember everything from last night?" he asked carefully. Sarah's mind raced backward through hazy memories. The decorated conference room, the open bar, her colleagues laughing too loudly. She remembered dancing, remembered feeling dizzy, remembered something uncomfortable. Her skin prickled with unease. "Most of it," she said slowly. "Why?" "Because you came home pretty upset. You told me something happened with Jake from accounting." The name landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of memory outward. Jake. Yes. She suddenly recalled feeling his hand on her, the unwelcome touch, the way it made her feel violated even through the alcohol fog. "He touched me," she said, the words coming out sharper than intended. "I was standing by the punch bowl, and he came up behind me and put his hands on my waist. It was completely inappropriate, David. I didn't ask for it, I didn't want it." She watched her husband's jaw tighten, watched his knuckles turn white as he gripped his phone. "Are you absolutely sure that's what happened?" "Yes," she insisted, though even as she said it, some part of her brain whispered doubt. The memories felt slippery, like trying to hold water in her fists. "I remember feeling uncomfortable. I remember his hands on me." David stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I'm going to call HR first thing Monday morning. This is unacceptable. He can't just..." He stopped, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "You're my wife, Sarah. Nobody gets to touch you like that." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude mixed with something else. Relief, maybe, that he believed her, that he was ready to defend her. But underneath it, that whisper of doubt grew louder. Had she told him everything last night? The details felt fuzzy, rearranged somehow. "Maybe we should just forget about it," she suggested weakly. "I don't want to make a big deal." "Forget about it." David turned on her, eyes blazing. "Sarah, this is sexual harassment. This is assault. If we don't report it, he'll do it to someone else. You said yourself you didn't want his hands on you." She nodded. Because what else could she do? The alternative, admitting she wasn't entirely sure what happened, that the alcohol had turned the evening into a kaleidoscope of jumbled images, felt impossible. David was already pulling up the HR contact information, already composing what he'd say. "I'm calling them right now," he announced. "I don't care that it's Sunday. This can't wait." David, wait, but he was already dialing, already walking into the hallway with that purposeful stride that meant his mind was made up. Sarah lay back against the pillows, closing her eyes against the pounding headache. She tried again to remember the exact sequence of events. She'd been drinking, more than usual, definitely. The holiday party had been in full swing, everyone loose and laughing. She remembered Jake talking to her, remembered music playing, remembered the room spinning slightly. And then what? His hands on her waist. Yes. But before that? After that? The memories refused to solidify, remaining stubbornly out of focus. She told herself it didn't matter. She knew what she felt, uncomfortable, violated, wrong. That was enough, wasn't it? From the hallway, she heard David's voice rising in anger as someone at HR apparently answered. She heard words like unacceptable and legal action and protecting my wife. Sarah pulled the covers over her head, suddenly wishing she could rewind the entire night and choose to stay home instead. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Sarah had called in sick, unable to face the office, but David insisted on going to the company himself. He'd taken a personal day from his own job, determined to see this through. "I'll handle it," he told her over breakfast, which she could barely touch. You shouldn't have to face him after what he did. Now, sitting in the sterile HR office across from Patricia Chen, the Director of Human Resources, David felt his anger crystallizing into something sharp and focused. Beside Patricia sat Jake himself, looking pale and confused, and his supervisor Linda. "Thank you for coming in," Patricia began, her voice professionally neutral. "We take all allegations of workplace misconduct very seriously. Mr. Harrison, I understand your wife Sarah has made a complaint about inappropriate physical contact at Friday's holiday party." "That's right," David said tersely. "Jake here thought it was acceptable to put his hands on my wife without her consent. I want to know what you're going to do about it." Jake's face flushed red. "I didn't, that's not what happened." "Are you calling my wife a liar?" David leaned forward, his voice dangerous. "Gentlemen, please." Patricia raised a calming hand. "Let's keep this professional. Jake, you'll have a chance to present your side. But first, Mr. Harrison, can you describe exactly what your wife told you occurred?" David recounted Sarah's story as she told it, Jake approaching her from behind, placing his hands on her waist uninvited, making her feel uncomfortable and violated. As he spoke, he watched Jake's expression shift from confusion to something that looked almost like pity, which only made David angrier. "Is that what she said?" Jake asked quietly when David finished. "That's what happened," David snapped. Patricia exchanged a glance with Linda before speaking carefully. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. As part of our standard procedure for any harassment claim, we reviewed the security footage from the party." David felt a surge of vindication. "Good. Then you've seen exactly what he did." "We have reviewed the footage very carefully," Patricia continued, her tone growing more cautious. "And I think it would be best if you viewed it yourself before we proceed further." Something in her voice made David's certainty waver. "What do you mean?" "I mean that what's on the video doesn't match the description you just gave us." Patricia pulled out a laptop, opening it to reveal a paused video file. "I want to show you this because I believe there's been a genuine misunderstanding. However, I want to prepare you, what you're about to see may be difficult." David felt ice spreading through his chest. "Just show me." Patricia clicked play. The video showed the corner of the conference room where the punch bowl had been set up. The timestamp read 10:47 p.m. After a moment, Sarah entered the frame, clearly intoxicated, her movements unsteady. She was laughing, holding a drink, talking animatedly with two other colleagues. Then Jake appeared, looking significantly more sober. He was holding a water bottle and seemed to be trying to have a conversation with the group. Sarah turned toward him, her face lighting up in a way that made David's stomach turn. What happened next unfolded with horrible clarity. Sarah reached out and placed both her hands on Jake's chest, leaning in close to say something. Jake stepped back, gently removing her hands. She laughed and reached for him again, this time running her hand down his arm. Jake turned away, clearly trying to disengage. Then Sarah, swaying noticeably, moved behind Jake and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing herself against his back. Jake immediately grabbed her arms and pulled them away, turning to face her with his hands up in a clear gesture of stop. Two other colleagues rushed over, one of them guiding Sarah away while Jake quickly left the area, his expression uncomfortable and embarrassed. The video ended. David sat frozen, his mind refusing to process what he'd just seen. That couldn't be Sarah. His wife wouldn't, she'd said he touched her, not the other way around. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice hollow. "That's not. She told me he put his hands on her." "I didn't touch her, man," Jake said quietly. "I specifically didn't touch her. I've been married for 3 years. When she started getting handsy, I removed myself from the situation as quickly as possible. I went straight home to my wife because I knew how it might look." Patricia spoke gently. "Mr. Harrison, I think your wife may have been more intoxicated than she realized. Memory formation is significantly impaired by alcohol. It's possible she genuinely remembers the incident differently than it occurred." "Or she lied," David said flatly, the words tasting like ash. "I don't think she lied," Jake interjected. I think she was really drunk and confused. That's why I didn't report this myself. I figured she'd be embarrassed enough when she remembered clearly. But David barely heard him. His mind was replaying every conversation he'd had with Sarah since Friday night, every detail she'd shared, every tear she'd shed while describing how violated she felt. Had all of that been a lie? Had she known the truth and deliberately twisted it? I need a copy of that footage, he said mechanically. Patricia hesitated. Mr. Harrison, I'm not sure that's. I need a copy. His voice left no room for argument. My wife accused this man of assault. I came here ready to see him fired or arrested. I deserve to know the truth. After a long pause, Patricia nodded. I'll provide you with a copy. But David, and I hope you don't mind me using your first name, I strongly suggest you approach this conversation with your wife carefully. If she truly doesn't remember clearly, showing her this footage will be traumatic. Not as traumatic as falsely accusing someone of assault, David replied coldly. David sat in his car in the office parking lot for 20 minutes after leaving the HR meeting, the USB drive containing the security footage burning like coal in his pocket. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his fingers had gone numb. He'd been so sure, so absolutely certain that Sarah was the victim, that Jake was the predator. He'd spent the entire weekend rehearsing what he'd say to HR, imagining the satisfaction of seeing justice done. Instead, he'd sat in that sterile office and watched his wife, the woman he'd pledged his life to, behave in ways he'd never imagined possible. The question that kept circling his mind was simple and terrible. Had she known? When she came home Friday night and told him Jake had touched her, when she cried in his arms about feeling violated, when she let him call HR and prepare to ruin a man's career, had she known she was lying? He pulled out his phone and called her. She answered on the first ring. David? How did it go? Is he being fired? The eagerness in her voice made him feel sick. I'm coming home. We need to talk. What happened? David, you're scaring me. Just stay there. I'll be home in 15 minutes. He hung up before she could respond, unable to bear another second of her voice without knowing the truth. The drive home passed in a blur. When he walked through the front door, Sarah was waiting in the living room, still in her pajamas, her face pale and drawn. She looked fragile, vulnerable, but now David couldn't help wondering if it was an act. What happened at HR? She asked immediately. Did they believe us? Are they taking action against Jake? David dropped his keys on the table with a sharp clatter that made her flinch. Why don't you tell me exactly what happened Friday night? Every detail. Sarah's eyes widened. I already told you. Jake came up behind me. Stop. David's voice cut through the air like a blade. Stop lying to me, Sarah. She froze, her mouth still open on the unfinished sentence. I'm not, David. What did they tell you? Whatever Jake said, he's lying to protect himself. HR has security footage. David pulled out the USB drive, holding it up between them like evidence in a trial. From the party. Do you want to know what it shows? The color drained from Sarah's face so quickly he thought she might faint. Her lips moved but no sound came out. It shows you touching him, David continued, his voice eerily calm despite the fury building in his chest. It shows you putting your hands on his chest, on his arm. It shows you wrapping your arms around him from behind while he tried to get away from you. It shows him specifically not touching you, Sarah. It shows the exact opposite of what you told me. No, Sarah whispered. No, that's not. I don't remember that. David, I swear I don't remember it that way. So you were lying about remembering, or you're lying now about not remembering. Which is it? Neither. I'm not lying. Her voice rose in panic. I remember feeling uncomfortable. I remember his hands. His hands removing yours from his body. David shouted, the calm facade finally cracking. His hands pushing you away because you were drunk and groping him. Do you have any idea what you almost did to that man? I went into that office ready to see him destroyed. Do you understand that? Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. I don't remember, she sobbed. David, Please, I don't remember it that way. I would never, I'm not that person. Then who are you? The question hung in the air between them. Because the person on that video isn't the woman I married. And the person who came home and lied about what happened, who let me call HR on a Sunday, who was ready to ruin an innocent man's life, I don't know who that is either. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking. Show me. Show me the video. Please, I need to see it. David's first instinct was to refuse, to let her suffer in uncertainty the way he was suffering. But beneath his anger was something else, a desperate hope that there was an explanation, that somehow this could all make sense. He pulled out his laptop and loaded the video file, then turned the screen toward her without a word. He watched her face as she watched herself. Watched her eyes widen in horror, watched her hand fly to her mouth, watched the exact moment she recognized the truth. When the video ended, she sat motionless, staring at the frozen final frame. I don't remember, she whispered. I swear to God, David, I don't remember doing that. The last clear memory I have is dancing with some people from marketing. Everything after that is just pieces. Fragments. I remember feeling hands on me, but I thought, she looked up at him, her eyes pleading. I genuinely thought I was remembering him touching me. How drunk were you? I don't know. Too drunk. Way too drunk. I lost count of the drinks. She wrapped her arms around herself. But that doesn't excuse this. That doesn't excuse what I did to Jake, or what I almost let you do to him. No, David agreed coldly. It doesn't. The silence in their living room stretched like a chasm. Sarah couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. Those were the hands that had touched Jake without permission. Those were the hands of someone she didn't recognize. I need to apologize to him, she said finally, her voice hoarse. I need to make this right. David laughed bitterly. Make it right? Sarah, you accused him of sexual assault. How exactly do you make that right? I don't know. She looked up at him desperately. But I have to try. I have to tell him I'm sorry, that I didn't remember, that I never meant. You never meant to what? To get drunk and assault him? To lie about it afterward? Which part didn't you mean? The cruelty in his voice made her flinch, but she knew she deserved it. Deserved worse, actually. I didn't lie, she insisted weakly. Not intentionally. I really believed. Stop saying that. David turned away from her, his shoulders rigid. Because here's what I can't figure out, Sarah. Even if you genuinely didn't remember touching him, you had to know how drunk you were. You had to know your memory wasn't reliable. But instead of admitting that, you told me a story with such confidence, such certainty, that I never questioned it. You let me be your weapon. The accusation hit like a physical blow because it was true. She had been uncertain about the details, had felt those gaps in her memory, but she'd filled them in with what made sense, what felt right. And once she'd told David her version, it had become real in her mind. The victim narrative had been easier than admitting she'd been out of control. You're right, she said quietly. I should have told you I wasn't sure. I should have admitted how drunk I was. But David, I swear I didn't knowingly lie. My brain just filled in the blanks wrong. There's research about this, about how alcohol affects memory formation, about false memories. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't intellectualize this. Don't hide behind research papers. You accused an innocent man of assault. Sarah stood on shaking legs. I know. And I'm going to call Jake right now and apologize. Patricia already cleared him of any wrongdoing. Officially, this is over. It's not over for me, Sarah said. It won't be over until I face what I did. She picked up her phone with trembling hands and searched the company directory for Jake's number. David watched her with an expression she couldn't read, disgust, maybe, or disappointment. Both were probably accurate. Jake answered on the third ring. Hello. Jake, it's Sarah. Her voice cracked on her own name. I need to apologize to you. I saw the footage. I know what really happened, and I'm so sorry." There was a long pause. "You really didn't remember?" "No. I mean, I remembered wrong. I remembered feeling hands on me, but I thought they were yours. I didn't realize I was the one." She couldn't finish the sentence. "I was inexcusably drunk. I had no right to touch you that way. And then to accuse you of—" She was crying again, the words coming out in gasps. "I almost ruined your life because I couldn't admit I'd blacked out. I am so deeply sorry. Sarah." Jake's voice was kind, which somehow made it worse. "I appreciate the apology. Truly. I knew you were too drunk to know what you were doing that night. That's why I removed myself immediately and didn't make a big deal of it." "You should have," she said. "You should have reported me. I deserved." "Nobody deserves to have their worst drunken moment define them," Jake interrupted gently. "But you do need to understand something. If the situation had been reversed, if I had been that drunk and touched you that way, my career would be over. There wouldn't be second chances or understanding. I want you to sit with that reality." Sarah felt the truth of his words settle over her like a weight. "I know. You're absolutely right. I accept your apology," Jake continued. "But Sarah, you need to get help. This isn't just about one bad night. This is about drinking so much that you lose time and then filling in those gaps with false narratives. That's dangerous. For you and for everyone around you." After they hung up, Sarah stood holding the phone, Jake's words echoing in her mind. David was still watching her from across the room. "He's right," David said quietly. "You need help. Professional help." "I know. I'm not sure I can stay here right now." The words landed like bombs. "I need time to think about this. About us." Sarah's heart lurched. "David, please. You let me believe you were assaulted, Sarah. Do you understand what that means? I was ready to destroy a man on your word. What if there hadn't been cameras? What if Jake's life had been ruined because you were too proud or too scared to admit you didn't remember?" "I would have told the truth eventually," she said desperately. "Once I realized." "Would you?" David's eyes were hard. "Or would you have convinced yourself that your version was real? You're so good at that, apparently." She had no answer for that. The terrifying truth was that she didn't know. She didn't know where her genuine confusion ended and her convenient self-deception began. "I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a few days," David said, already moving toward the bedroom. "I need space to process this." Sarah watched him pack a bag, each item he folded and placed inside feeling like a piece of their marriage being dismantled. When he walked past her toward the door, she reached for his arm. "I love you," she whispered. "I'm going to fix this. I'm going to get help." He looked down at her hand on his arm, and she suddenly remembered another hand on another arm, her hand on Jake's arm in that video. She released him immediately. "I love you too," David said finally. "But love isn't enough right now. Trust is. And Sarah, I don't know if I can trust you anymore." The door closed behind him with a quiet click that sounded like finality. 3 months had passed since the office party, and Sarah sat in Dr. Morrison's office for what had become a weekly ritual. The therapist's room was painted in soft blues and greys, designed to be calming, but Sarah never felt calm here. These sessions were where she confronted the hardest truths about herself. "Tell me about the meeting with your colleagues," Dr. Morrison prompted gently. Sarah took a deep breath. "I went back to the office last Monday. First time since everything happened. HR arranged for me to meet with the people who were at the party, to apologize in person. It had been excruciating. Facing her colleagues, people who had seen the video, who knew what she'd done, required more courage than she'd known she possessed. But it was necessary. Jake had been gracious, his wife Amanda less so, which Sarah understood completely. How did it feel? Humiliating. Necessary. Both. Sarah twisted her hands in her lap. But also clarifying. "I spent so long in my own head, creating narratives about what happened, that actually talking to the people who were there, who remember what I don't, it helped ground me in reality." Dr. Morrison nodded. We've talked about how alcohol-induced blackouts work, how your brain literally couldn't form new memories during those missing hours. But we've also discussed how you filled those gaps with what felt true instead of what was true, Sarah finished. It was a distinction she'd come to understand intimately. When I woke up that Saturday morning, I had fragments, the feeling of hands, the sensation of being uncomfortable. My brain automatically arranged those pieces into a story where I was the victim because that story made sense, felt right. It's what I wanted to believe. And perhaps what felt safer to believe, Dr. Morrison added. Accepting that you'd been the one who crossed boundaries required accepting a loss of control that terrified you. That was the heart of it, the thing Sarah had been running from her whole life. Control. She'd always prided herself on being responsible, reliable, in command of herself. Admitting she'd drunk herself into a blackout, that she'd behaved inappropriately and couldn't even remember it, that shattered her self-image completely. I've started attending AA meetings, Sarah said. 3 times a week. I'm on day 93 without a drink. How does that feel? Hard. Really hard. Especially because I'm not sure I'm an alcoholic. She saw Dr. Morrison's expression and quickly added, I know. That's what everyone says. But I never drank alone, never drank during the day. This was one catastrophic night, not a pattern. Yet you've chosen to abstain completely. Why? Sarah considered this carefully. Because I can't trust myself anymore. Because even if I'm not an alcoholic, I clearly have a problem with knowing my limits. And because... She paused, feeling the weight of the admission. Because I need to prove to myself, and to David, that I can make hard choices. That I can commit to change. David. The name still hurt to say aloud. He'd come back after 2 weeks at his brother's place, but things between them were different. Fragile. They were living together but existing in separate orbits, both uncertain if they were healing or just delaying the inevitable. Have you and David considered couples counseling? We start next week. Sarah felt a flutter of hope mixed with fear. He says he wants to try. That he still loves me. But I can see it in his eyes sometimes. He's looking at me and wondering if he really knows who I am. Do you know who you are? The question hung in the air. Sarah looked out the window at the grey winter sky, thinking about identity, about the distance between who we think we are and who we reveal ourselves to be in moments of crisis. I'm learning, she said finally. I'm someone who made a terrible mistake. Who hurt people. Who lied to herself and others, even if I didn't mean to. But I'm also someone who's trying to take responsibility, to change, to be better. Dr. Morrison smiled slightly. That's significant growth from where you started. Sarah thought back to those first sessions, when she'd been defensive, full of justifications and explanations. She'd wanted the therapist to absolve her, to confirm that she was really the victim of her own faulty memory. Instead, Dr. Morrison had pushed her to sit with the discomfort of accountability. I wrote Jake and Amanda a letter, Sarah said suddenly. Not apologizing again, I think I've apologized enough. But explaining what I've learned, how I'm changing. I wanted them to know that their grace, Jake's kindness despite everything, it mattered. It gave me the space to become someone worthy of it. Did you send it? Not yet. I'm not sure if sending it is about their healing or mine. I don't want to make them deal with my guilt again. That's a wise consideration. They sat in silence for a moment. Sarah had learned that Dr. Morrison never rushed to fill quiet spaces, that sometimes the most important work happened in these pauses. I saw the video again last week, Sarah admitted. David doesn't know. I still have the file. I watch myself in those 3 minutes and I try to recognize her, the woman stumbling around, touching someone without permission, completely unaware of boundaries or consequences. Why do you watch it? Because I'm afraid I'll forget. Not the way I forgot that night, but genuinely forget, minimize it, turn it into something less than it was. I watch it to remember how far I fell, so I never let myself fall that far again. Dr. Morrison leaned forward slightly. Sarah, there's a difference between healthy accountability and self-punishment. You've done the work of facing what you did. At some point, you have to also forgive yourself. I'm not there yet, Sarah whispered. Maybe I never will be. Then let's talk about what forgiveness might look like. That evening, Sarah came home to find David cooking dinner, actual cooking, not just heating up takeout, which had been their routine for months. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. Smells good, she said cautiously. Chicken piccata. Your favorite. He didn't look up from the stove. Thought we could eat together. Actually talk. They sat across from each other at the dining table, the space between them feeling both vast and intimate. For several minutes, they ate in silence. I got a promotion, David said finally. Regional manager. It's what I've been working toward. David, that's amazing. Sarah felt genuine joy for him mixed with sadness that he'd waited days to tell her, that they'd become so disconnected. Why didn't you say anything? I wanted to. But every conversation we have feels like walking through a minefield. I wasn't sure. He trailed off, then started again. I wasn't sure you'd earned the right to celebrate with me yet. The honesty hurt, but Sarah preferred it to the careful politeness they'd been trading. I understand. But I'm telling you now because I want to try, David continued, finally meeting her eyes. I want to believe we can get past this. That we can rebuild. I want that too. More than anything. It's going to take time, Sarah. Years. Maybe. And there are going to be moments when I remember that morning in the HR office, when I watched that video and felt my entire understanding of my marriage crack open. Those memories don't just go away. I know. Sarah set down her fork, her appetite gone. I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you can trust me again. That's my choice and my responsibility. David studied her face for a long moment. You look different lately. Clearer somehow. Sobriety and therapy will do that. She managed a small smile. Turns out facing yourself is hard but necessary work. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. For doing that work. For not running away from this. The words broke something open in Sarah's chest. She'd been so focused on her shame, her guilt, the damage she'd caused, that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge the hard work of repair. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Hey, David reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. After a moment's hesitation, he closed the distance, his fingers warm against her skin. We're going to be okay. I don't know what okay looks like yet, but we're going to find it. Sarah held his hand like a lifeline, feeling the weight of all that had broken between them and the tentative, fragile hope that they might build something stronger from the pieces. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the kitchen cleaned, Sarah sat alone in the bedroom with her laptop. She pulled up the video file one more time, watching herself stumble through those 3 terrible minutes. Then she took a deep breath and deleted it. Not because she wanted to forget, she'd never forget, but because she didn't need the video anymore to remember who she'd been. That woman would always be part of her story. But she wasn't the end of the story. Sarah opened a new document and began to write, My name is Sarah, and I'm 93 days sober. This is what I've learned about accountability, about truth, and about the person I'm becoming. The words flowed easier than she expected, each one a small act of honesty, each sentence a step toward the person she wanted to be. Outside, the winter night was dark and cold, but inside, something tentative and new was beginning to take root. It wasn't redemption, not yet, maybe not ever. But it was responsibility. It was change. And for now, that would have to be enough.